On today's program, we're very happy to have Karen Davis, PhD, the founder and president of United Poultry Concerns, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the compassionate and respectful treatment of domestic fowl. Founded in 1990, United Poultry Concerns addresses the treatment of domestic fowl in food production, science, education, entertainment, and human companionship situations. And Karen has her PhD in English from the University of Maryland, College Park, where she taught for 12 years in the English department. And her work and her op-eds, letters to the editor, have been featured in the New York Times, New Yorker, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Washington Times, Washingtonian, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and on the list goes. Eventually we will talk to Karen, but this is what she gets for having such a varied background in animal advocacy. So her several books include Home for Henny, a children's book published by UPC, Instead of Chicken, Instead of Turkey, a poultryless poultry potpourri, a cookbook published by the Book Publishing Company, and Prison Chickens, Poisoned Eggs, an inside look at the modern poultry industry, More Than a Meal, The Turkey in History, Myth, Ritual, and Reality, and The Holocaust and the Handmaid's Tale, a case for comparing atrocities, the new revised edition of Karen's landmark book, Prison Chickens, Poisoned Eggs, out this year. And I think that may have been the last time you were on the program talking about that book, Karen. I want to welcome you, and let's talk a bit about Proposition 2. I have my concerns. I like to look a little more deeply into issues at times, and the way that Prop 2 was presented in California, and perhaps you can help me as really the champion for chickens. I saw it being presented as stop animal cruelty. I saw that we would now have humane farms, and I unfortunately saw a video with Wolfgang Puck talking about how wonderful it is that he's given up using foie gras, but that he still has to attract customers. So now he's making pate out of the livers from cage-free chickens, and immediately my sympathy goes to those chickens, and I wonder, what is the plight of a cage-free chicken and the plight of a battery hen chicken? I mean, talk to us about the lives of chickens, which I believe could be from going from shell to hell, basically, in all cases.
Yeah, Bob, actually, we have a poster that we show people when we're out on the street leafleting from shells to hell. So that's about it for chickens, sad to say, in this world right now. And I will be glad to briefly describe the difference between standard battery cage operations, in which well over 95% of hens used for egg production are living, and the so-called cage-free operations, which are the kinds of operations that would most likely take the place of any cage operations that may be supplanted as a result of the passage of Proposition 2, the prevention of cruelty to farmed animals in California. As most people know, probably most of your listeners, the cage operations are about as cruel and unbelievably horrific for chickens as could be imagined. I mean, we've seen enough of the undercover videos that have been done by various groups showing these birds living in total filth, with the air filled with feathers and dander from their skin, and all kinds of ammonia fumes from the decomposing uric acid in the heaps and mounds of manure below the cages. The hens are forced to stand on wire for their entire lives, and about the only way they can get off the wire is if one of the chickens dies, and then they can stand on the corpse to get off the wire. So it's such a horrible situation that it's almost sad when the corpses are occasionally removed from these cages, because they don't have any choice then but to go back on the wire. So that kind of suggests how abysmal their lives are. And of course, anybody who has ever been around chickens or knows anything about how they evolved knows that chickens evolved at the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. They come from the jungles or the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, and they are very busy and active all day with their extended family life, and they're foraging and roosting in trees at night, and roosters are very protective of hens, and they run around a lot, and they dust bathe and they sunbathe, and I know from our own sanctuary here, it's so interesting as the days become shorter in the late summer and fall, and at this time of year too, through the winter, the chickens will follow the sun throughout the day because they need that sunlight, and they obviously relish it. So you look at an animal, a bird, who has these characteristics, who has these needs, and then you imagine this bird being not only stuck in a cage where there's no free space around her body at all, but she's always bumping into other birds in the cage who are just as frustrated as she is, or into the bars. And you imagine that she's not only in a cage, but she is in a building that is filled with nothing but cages. I don't think that we can even imagine what it must be like for a chicken, again, being a bird who would be in a jungle, and doing all the things they do and being active and using their legs and their wings all day long to express and exercise their nature and their interests, being in a world so hellish as to be nothing but cages surrounded by four walls. And in these cages, birds who are in a state of bewildered misery that, again, I don't think we can even imagine it, because we can imagine our species being in that kind of a world and how horrible it would be. But for another species of animal whose nature in no way could make sense out of such a place, I have always contended that for these birds, it's much worse than it would be for a human being in many ways, because there's nothing in their makeup that could make sense out of being in such a horrible, unspeakably cruel, filthy, dirty, hopeless environment. So that's the cage operation. And of course, all of these hens, virtually all of them, when they break out of their shells in the huge mechanical incubators at the hatchery, they go to what's called a servicing room, where they're serviced by having their beaks burned off, which is an extremely painful operation. It has been scientifically shown that chickens, like other birds, have nerve endings to the very tip of their beak, so to have their beak burned off is extremely painful, and once again is an experience to which there is no counterpart in their evolution or in their life, because chickens have beaks that are designed and have evolved in order to enable them to forage for food, to be able to pick up very minute objects, to be able to preen their bodies, that is, to pick out debris and things that build up. They use their beaks to turn their eggs when the hens lay their eggs. They use their beaks as an exploratory organ. It's their mouth and their hand kind of at the same time. And it only makes sense that an organ that functions so significantly for these birds would be a highly sensitive organ. So when you think about hens in battery cages, there really is no language to describe what it is for them to be sitting there with their mutilated beaks in a cage surrounded by nothing but cages, in a kind of gloom that one has to really experience to understand it. But it's dark, but there are always lights burning.
Karen,
continuous.
Karen, we need to take a break for a moment. If you'll stay with us, we'll continue with the story of chickens' lives. We're looking at chickens both in battery cages and cage-free today on Go Vegan with Bob Linden. And please support this program so we can have the plight of the chicken in mainstream media, so the birds have representation. You can make a donation online at goveganradio.com.